to be able to talk to you guys. I wanted to start with a little bit of background about HuggingFace. We started the company a bit more than 4 years ago now. We based in Brooklyn and in Paris, usually. Obviously, these days, everyone is remote. So we have people all over the globe these days. I'm personally in Connecticut to enjoy some more nature, some more space than in my small Brooklyn apartment. We've been lucky to raise a bit more than $20 million so far from really good investors, some of them in New York, and a lot of them actually on the West Coast, like Ronnie Conway with a fund called A Capital, Kevin Durant when he was still on the West Coast at the Warriors, hence the hat. Richard Socher, who is like the chief scientist at Salesforce, and many other angels that are based on the West Coast. We most popular for our open source library, which is called HuggingFace Transformers, that I'll show it to you after. We've been lucky to have been mentioned. I think now it's in more than 1,000 research papers, and have more than 1,000 companies using our open source. What I'll do is that I'll start by giving you a little bit of an overview of NLP if you've not been following it for the past few years. And then I'll go in more details into what we're offering at HuggingFace, what is our open source doing, and how you can leverage it at your company. And I want to start with kind of like a statement that is bold or not, depending on how much time you spent on NLP these past few months. I strongly believe that today NLP is the most important field of machine learning. My background before I started HuggingFace is in computer vision. So I've had the chance to see the technology cycle of a lot of different technologies. And when I look at computer vision, I look at time series, I look at self-driving cars. I feel like there's been really kind of like a strong movement for the development of NLP in the past few years. And I'll try to explain kind of why NLP is becoming so big and so important in the machine learning world now. First thing, like I wanted to define it for people who are not familiar with it. NLP is defined as a branch of artificial intelligence concerned with understanding natural language, right? So to make it simple, you have computer vision for images or video, self-driving car, you have time series. NLP is really the branch that has to do with any sort of text, right? And so usually you englobe to that not only written text, but also voice, because most of the time to process voice, what you do is you do speech to text, and you process the text, and then text to speech to reply with voice, for example, on Siri or Alexa or things like that. If you can take a kind of like a step back to understand the importance of NLP, you realize that most of your day is spent in natural language, is spent on text. Obviously, the way I'm talking to you now is through voice, it's through text. But then hopefully, when you'll be able to hang out with your friends in person, you're going to chat in text. The emails that you're sending, that you receive, is in text. The news that you read, the book that you read, all of that is text. Even the activities which you wouldn't consider as mainly text wouldn't be understandable without text. Like it's the case, for example, for movies, for TV shows. If you remove the dialogue from it, then it doesn't make any sense. Now, if you think about companies, you'll also realize that every single company is built around natural language and is built around text. From customer support, sales, external communication, internal communication, all of that, if you think of it, is text. If you think of the largest departments in most of the companies, the departments where you have a lot of humans, like customer support, sales, they are natural language processing departments, right? They take as input a text and they output any form of text. So if you think of it as natural language is the interface of humans, it is anywhere and everywhere. And the interesting thing here is that if you look at what happened in terms of NLP science and the way technology can understand text, there's been a really big paradigm switch in the last few years. Some of it is due to kind of like longer technology trends. Obviously, the ability to have more and more compute, the ability to have access to large open text data sets, which is basically the web. And the last missing piece to the puzzle here is transfer learning, right? Which has been introduced for NLP and started to work with NLP around 3 years ago with the foundational paper, Attention is All You Need. And basically the combination of these three trends led to deep learning for NLP to finally work, right? Finally, now you manage to have NLP models that can be pre-trained on very large data sets and then fine-tuned on any specific task. What it led to is pretty insane progress in a lot of different NLP tasks, right? So for example, here I'm showing you the progress in text classification, right? So the task of taking a text and being able to classify it. These are results from the GLUE benchmark, which is an aggregation of different evaluation metrics. And you see that in just a matter of 2 years, it went from 69% accuracy to 88. And what's even more interesting than the figures themselves is that if you compare it to a human baseline, meaning that if you ask humans to perform the same tasks, you see that we've not passed the human baseline. Obviously, I'm not saying that we are in a world where we can do human level NLP on every single task. It's specific to this benchmark, this evaluation, and this specific context. But at least the fact that we managed to reach the human baseline on this evaluation is really promising and exciting to me. It doesn't just happen in text classification, it happened in every single NLP task. So here I'm showing you the progress for question answering. Question answering is a task where you give the model a text and then you formulate a question in natural language about this text. And the model will show you where the answer is in the document. And if you see here, in a matter of years, we went from below 70 to now be over 90. And the interesting thing for this specific benchmark, science benchmark, that is called SQUAD, is that at some point the authors of the evaluation thought that maybe their evaluation wasn't good enough, right? That somehow the model could trump the evaluation. And so they should work on a more difficult benchmark for it to be more useful. So they worked on SQUAD 2.0. And what happened is that the exact same thing happened. At the beginning, it was a bit hard, as you can see, December 17 to June 18. But really, really fast, models were introduced that drastically improved the performance and the accuracy on these evaluations. And we went back to 90% accuracy on this task of question answering. What it means is that basically, thanks to the progress of transfer learning for NLP, we're moving from a world where, put it simply, only humans could understand natural language, as it was the case before, which is why customer support, sales, communication are very human-intensive departments that are using not so much technology at the moment. We're moving from this world where only humans could understand natural language to a world where finally technology, algorithms, and models are able to classify, understand, generate natural language at sometimes as well as humans do. What's even more fascinating on the topic is that pretty fast it went from science to production. For multiple reasons. One of the reasons being that most of the complexity of this science is hidden behind the weights. It went in a matter of months from state of the art to people applying it in production for real company use cases. And here I'm going to give you a couple of examples of companies that are using transformers in production in real use cases today. A very popular way to use these models is text classification. As I talked about before, you take a text and you classify it based on your own data. So for example, Monzo, which is a bank based in London, I've been using transformers to classify their customer support emails, right? So they receive an email. They basically train the model on 100 examples of emails with priority high and 100 examples of emails with priority low. And then the model is able to predict the priority of a new incoming message. And then they're able to route it to the right team and the relevant team. So they receive, for example, an email, I'm very unhappy about my credit card. The model is going to be able to classify the priority, the sentiment, and for example, the department. You can do that for any sort of classification, right? So it can classify based on the sentiment, it can classify based on the topic, it can classify based on any sort of like topologies that you're interested in. The other really interesting use case is information extraction, right? So you take any form of text. It can be here for this example for Chegg, it's like a homework or online classes. Could be news article, it can be email, it can be comments, it can be tweets, it can be any form of text. And thanks to these models, you are able to extract information, right? So for example, you're able to extract that it's talking about Washington as a person, rather obviously than a location, extract dates or extract topics. But you could also extract location, you could extract companies, any form of information to basically go from unstructured data, right? Unstructured text to make it structured and create, for example, tags, create categorization, act on it, use that in templates to follow up or things like that. Another really important task is question answering that is used, for example, by Bing. They have, for example, the first page of results, then they're gonna apply this question answering task to give you an answer to your question in natural language, right? So if you ask, what is the color of Kim Kardashian's hair? Then it's going to identify in the documents where the answer to your question is. Another one is text generation or text summarization. So for example, you've experienced that in Gmail, right? When you're typing an email, then it's going to give you a recommendation of what to continue with some autocomplete. It's using transformer models. Another one is, for example, to go from a small piece of text to a longer piece of text, right? So Bloomberg, for example, can use transformers to, when the stock price of a value of a stock changes, to generate a small paragraph about that. Can be used the other way around, meaning that, let's say you have a long news article. Using some models, some transformer models, you'll be able to create a summary of these documents. And last one, probably the most kind of like mainstream and most like well-known to the general public is conversational AI, right? Siri, Alexa. And here, a good example is Square, that is using transformer models to power their customer support chatbots, right? To give the ability to customers to ask questions and get answers 24/7 right away. And what's really interesting is that I started to talk about science and then use cases. And there's really kind of like this very positive cycle where the more science progresses, the more use cases in production you see. And the more use cases are proving their value, the more companies are investing in science and improving it. So there's very much like this positive cycle that leads to exponential improvement and progress for the field of NLP. And now after that, I figured I would give you kind of like a little bit of an overview of what we've been doing at HuggingFace. We've been lucky to power a big chunk of this paradigm switch and this progress of NLP with our open source. So if you go to GitHub/HuggingFace, you'll see all our most popular repositories. Most popular is obviously transformers that have had almost 30,000 GitHub stars, 7,000 forks, more than 400 contributors now, that is used by more than 2,000 repositories now. I'll give you kind of like a deeper overview of it a bit later. Some other popular repositories from us are HuggingFace tokenizers, which is fast. Tokenizer. Tokenizer is what you use to basically go from text to what these models are able to process. So tokenizers is a fast library to do that way faster than you would before. And NLP is the most recent of our releases, where you have a repository of data sets and evaluation metrics for NLP researchers. And now I'm going to give you kind of like a tour of how you can use our technology and HuggingFace Transformers, which is now the most popular NLP library out there. So you can go from huggingface.co, and here you'll see that you have a search box for models, for organizations. Here you can basically choose which framework you want to use, PyTorch, TensorFlow. You can choose the tasks that you want to use, and obviously the languages that you're interested in. So maybe after we can take a model that is pretty popular, maybe we can take Roberta Large. Then on the model page, you'll see some of an idea of the usage for the model, and you'll have a snippet to use it directly into transformers. In addition to tools we create, because we became the standard for NLP, there are a lot of ecosystem tools that come with it. One of them is Expert, for example, which is an explainability tool to let you understand a little bit better how your neural network behaves and kind of like take a look under the hood. So now, once you've kind of like identified one of the models that you're interested in, one of the tasks that you're interested in, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at the new feature that we're going to introduce in a few days. It's not public yet, but that we believe is going to be really, really cool for people to use our library. So it's an Inference API. It's basically, once you've identified the models that you're interested in for the task you're interested in, then we will provide you a demo and an endpoint to perform this NLP task, right? So for example, we'll take text generation task, right? Which is what you have in Gmail to basically autocomplete your text. So here you'll see that all the models that we have in the library are available. We have more than 2,000 models now in the library, and more than 30 new models are added every day to the library. So by using it, you get access to basically all the best of the NLP today. So for example, we'll take a model that has been very popular, which is GPT-2. And here we'll take a distilled version of GPT-2. If you're not familiar with distillation, it's a process to reduce the size and so to make the models faster to run in production, right? So here it's a text generation task. So what it does is that it's going to complete your text, right? So if you say, for example, my name is Jack and I'm an engineer, then you compute, right? And then it's going to suggest some auto completion, right? So here it completed, and also the owner of the project. And then it continues after that, right? You could try that for any of the models in our model hub. Let's try a different task from our model hub. For example, we can try translation, right? Here we'll use, for example, this D5 model, right? And here what it does, all right. So it's still in beta, so sometimes you still see some problems. So let me restart here. So I'm gonna start translation again. Maybe I'll take a smaller model. All right, I'll take the T5 small. And if I do that, my name is Zach. Let's see if it works there. All right, it looks like there might be a problem with this specific model. So let me try again. All right. All right, I'm gonna try translation and maybe how do I start? And all right. All right. So when the model is not in loaded in the hub already, then it's going to automatically load it. So let's see. Now the model is loading. So we'll wait for a few seconds. All right, and maybe, and in the meantime, I'll take like other tasks. So another task that is pretty popular is text classification. So here, for example, I'm gonna take the distill BERT. So BERT is another very popular model from our hub. And if I do, for example, very happy today, as I think this one is an emotion classification model, then obviously I'm very happy today. You see that the label emotion negative is not probable, and the positive one is very, very probable. Then you have other tasks like token classification, for example, to find locations. So if I pick, for example, I'll take this one from France, particularly in Paris, right? for example, here it identified an entity which is location with reference. And you can do that for every single model in our model hub. So you have more than 2,000 models that you can run the inference for them. And the beauty of the fact that this is based on open source is that you can start by using the pre-trained models or the fine-tuned models that other people and the community shared. But if you want to go deeper, if you want to train on your own data, on your own data set for your specific task, then you can obviously use our open source, train your own model, and then add it to the hub, and automatically you'll be able to run the inference for it. So it gives you kind of like a little bit of an overview of like how you can use our technology to do NLP in production. There are many, many different use cases. As I said, more than 1,000 companies are using it in production today. I'm sure if you think about your company, you'll find some use cases. So if that works for everyone now, we can switch to kind of like a more informal Q&A, and maybe I'll start by taking a couple of questions. I'll leave my screen shared so that I can use it to show some things. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat. I'll take the first question from Mohit, which was, how were you able to train so many models? The GPU cost must have been sky high. So all our models are community-based, right? So it's a whole community of NLPs that have been training models and then sharing it through our hub. So obviously we train some models ourselves. We build some models ourselves, like Distilbert, for example, or PruneBert, which is a new model that we've released a few weeks ago. But most of the models that you're seeing here in the community hub have been trained by other people, other companies, and by the community. So for example, you can see we have an organization page where you see some of the organizations that have trained their own models and shared their own models. So we're really grateful for them. That's also what makes the NLP community great, which is that everyone collaborates, everyone open sources, everyone shares. So for example, here you have like Facebook that have shared a lot of models. You have Microsoft that has shared a lot of models. Google has shared a lot of models, and a lot of like other companies have too. And the same way, if you train your own model, we really encourage you to share it with the community rather than just keeping it for yourself. At HuggingFace, we really believe that everyone has to come together to help push the field forwards. It's not going to be one company that is going to solve the field of NLP. Everyone will contribute to it. So we really encourage this dynamic of collaboration, of open source, open science, for everyone to come together and help accelerate the progress of the field. All right, I'm gonna take another question. So Ahmed is asking what labels is the classification based on? It can be any sort of labels, really. If you start from the pre-trained models or the models that are in the community hub, you usually have the most popular types of classification, right? So like sentiment, for example, classification. But then the same way Monzo is training a model on their own classification label, in their case, customer support priority, right? Priority high, priority low. If you have a few hundred examples for a different classification, then you can fine tune your own model really easily and have your own labels depending on your specific use case. Does it answer your question, Ahmed? If not, feel free to add it to the chat. All right, can you please share code, Git link steps for current example. Looks great. So the best way to find that is obviously to go on GitHub. So on GitHub, then you'll go to our repository transformers, right? Here you'll see examples. And based on your use case, you'll see a list of different examples. So for example, if you want text classification, then you can see the example here in TensorFlow and in PyTorch. And you'll even have the collab to replicate the results. So yeah, the URL is GitHub/HuggingFace/transformer/tree-masters examples. So that's where you'll find all the examples. All right, Francisco is asking, I noticed you support TF2 and PyTorch. Is there feature parity between the two in HuggingFace, and is one lagging behind the other? So we started with PyTorch and added TF2 support later. So there are still some aspects where we need to catch up with TF2, but we're aiming at having like 100% feature parity very, very soon. So you really have the same capabilities in both frameworks. Obviously, we're taking advantage of some aspects where one framework is stronger than the other. There are still some specificities, so we're taking advantage of that to make it easier for you and more powerful to you depending on the framework that you prefer. But we're aiming at having 100% feature parity between the two. All right, Greg is asking, how do you do NLP inference, getting embeddings, get results at scale, since each request takes significant amount of time? Do you have any specific open source frameworks to manage the request? So it depends a lot on your use case, obviously. It depends a lot on your constraints, right? Some companies will have more need for low latency, others will have more flexibility on that. Some will want to optimize for inference cost, others won't. So it's hard to reply in a general way. You have more and more resources online of companies who did it. So for example, Roblox a couple of weeks ago shared a very nice blog post that I'm gonna paste in the chat now to explain how they scaled to serve 1 billion daily requests on CPUs. So you definitely have more and more companies that are running these models in production at scale. We can help with some of it. We're helping a bunch of companies on that. But it's very much still a case-by-case basis. All right. Then another question from Kevin is, all right, let me go back here to HuggingFace, is, could you give an example of NLP and one of those models in real-time applications? So I gave a couple in this slide. Basically, these are all like real life examples, right? So for example, if you go to Bing, right, what's the color of Kim Kardashian's hair? Here, this is this first paragraph, this first box is powered by transformer models. So that's kind of like a real life examples that you can see. Here, Monzo is using it for customer support text classification, check for information extraction. Gmail is using it for autocomplete. Square is using it for conversational AI. These are all real life, today's examples of use of transformer models in the context of a company. Curtis asked, you mentioned we've reached human level success rates in text classification, but what areas of NLP do you think will be harder to reach human level performance in the near future? I believe the hardest NLP task today is open domain conversational AI. And we know it pretty well because we started the company working on this very topic because we were excited by it and we wanted to start with the hardest one of LNLP. It's basically the ability to have a conversation with an agent in an open domain setting, like on any topic, not on a very specific topic. It's really hard to do because it's a combination of a lot of different NLP tasks. You need to be able to extract meaning. You need to be able to extract information from the message from the user. You need to be able to classify with emotion. You need to be able to understand like sarcasm, for example, and you need to be able to reply accurately too. So you need to be good at text generation. So it's a really hard task, open domain conversational AI. That's probably going to be the last one to be solved, at least in my mind. All right, Julian is asking, what techniques do you use to ensure low latency when evaluating a model response, for example, for text generation? So I replied a little bit to this question before. It will a little bit depends on your use case. It will depend on your task. It will depend on your training sets and what do you run the inference for. For example, if you're doing text generation, it's not the same thing to generate text on just a couple of characters and to run it on a long news article. So it's going to be different depending on your use case, really. So Dan is asking, can we fine-tune these models on the TPUs? Absolutely, you can. We support TPU training. We've been working in a really close fashion with the TPU team, and we want to keep investing in the topic. So yeah, there are some, I think, examples. If I go back to what I was showing you before, so you have, yeah, some help, especially in the trainer to train with TPUs. All right, does HuggingFace focus more on NLP research or on democratizing NLP? That's a good question. We believe you can't do one without the other anymore. We believe there's no point in separating science from engineering and science from production anymore for this topic. So we're doing both at the same time. We both invest really heavily on science and trying to build the best science for NLP, but at the same time, making it as widely usable as possible. So we really blend the two. We think it doesn't make sense to split the two. You should be doing research with an engineering mind and with like thinking about how to democratize NLP. At the same time, when you want to democratize NLP, you have to understand the science and be able to move the science forward. And it creates this very kind of like a positive cycle again, where the better you get into science, the more companies can use it in production, the more problems it solves for companies, and the more problems you solve for them, the more they can invest into science. So yeah, we want to be part of this cycle by doing both. And if you look at the background of most of the team members at HuggingFace, they have an interest both on the research side, but also on the engineering side to democratize it. So Dan is asking, are most models available in TF2? Yeah, there are still models that are only available in PyTorch, but progressively, we want to make every single model available both in PyTorch and TF2. And even further than that, you'll see in the library that we want to create more bridges.
I'm not on video. Huh?
Oh,
Yeah, no doubt, no.
oh, sorry, I think someone is on. All right, I'll continue. So even more than making models available in two frameworks, we want to create more and more bridges between the two, because we realize that sometimes teams need to move from one to another, even in the life cycle of building a new feature and building a new NLP capability. They want sometimes to be able to have the research team work on a model on the modeling side of things in PyTorch. And then for some reason, maybe the production team is using more TensorFlow because they're using some production tools from TensorFlow. So they want to be able to kind of like do the modeling in PyTorch and then do the production in TensorFlow. So even in the same project, we want to encourage people to be able to go from TF2 to PyTorch in a very smooth way. All right, another question from Raul. OpenAI recently started providing the API. Do you see other companies following that or stop providing the models on platform like HuggingFace? That's a good question. Obviously, we have a very different approach than OpenAI. We're really investing on open source, on community, on being collaborative with everyone. OpenAI has done a fantastic job in modeling with obviously GPT-2 and the new version of GPT-2. And we're happy because it validates the fact that NLP has become really, really important. If you remember from a few years ago, and OpenAI is still doing other things like robotics, reinforcement learning, computer vision, but the fact that they released their first monetization feature on something like NLP proves that there's very great potential for it. We're happy that they help pushing the field forward. They help kind of like showing that companies can use NLP in production today, not tomorrow, but really, really today. So we're really happy about it. We think it contributes to moving the field of NLP to the mainstream. Timothy is asking, would you recommend using Apache Arrow-based NLP library to replace TF Record writer-based dataset preparation? That's a good question. Unfortunately, as the CEO of the company, I can sometimes not go as deep as I would like to on specific topics. I would recommend you to ask that on GitHub, or maybe someone from the HuggingFace team, if they're listening now, can jump in, but I wouldn't be the right person to answer this question. Alex is asking, thank you for the great talk. Do you think there is a risk with the reuse of the base language models, which are so expensive to build, without truly knowing their content? Totally. Yeah, we think it's important to make these models not as black box. So that's why, for example, we're encouraging, if you go on the model pages, we're encouraging people, oh, that's a bad example because there's no card, but we're encouraging people to add model cards, right? Which are like a way for people to explain what data set they're using, what are the potential biases, what will work, what won't work, to give more explanations and give people the tools to understand what is going to work and what won't work, what kind of biases they need to be careful of. So we want people to share that more and more. And that's one of the reasons why we've worked on adding data sets and metrics to the library. So if you see here, you'll see like a list of all the data sets that can be used. And then we even have a viewer, so you can take a closer look at the data set. You can change like the keys. It's a really good way to explore the data sets, understand what the are about what's in there to potentially identify limitations, identify biases, and make sure it's not a problem for production setting. Oswald is asking, what are your thoughts regarding GPT-3 and beyond? So I answered a little bit before. I think it's a really great thing. I think it pushes the field forwards. It makes it more mainstream than it is. So I hope companies will keep investing on these models to make NLP even better than it is today. Hamed is asking, can you give a high-level description of the steps in order to leverage these pre-trained models for domain-specific applications? For example, learning embeddings for a particular domain, or the Monzo example you gave. Also, what do you do to work with languages that don't have a lot of pre-trained models? So good resources on that is our blog. So if you go here, for example, here you have a tutorial about how to train a new language model from scratch using transformers and tokenizers. So it will give you like a very good overview on how to do that. And here it's to pre-train on Esperanto, but obviously can be used for everything else. And then in the examples, then also you have a lot of I think you can also go into the notebooks here where you have not only the HuggingFace notebooks but also community notebooks. So that's what I was looking for before. For example, train T5 on TPUs, right? So here you have a tutorial to do that, but also you have a lot of like different ones. So feel free to check them out. They'll help you tremendously. And obviously we're an open source company. So if you're running into any issue, just open an issue on GitHub, submit a pull request if you want to make improvements. We really appreciate that, and we'll be really good at replying really fast to these. So Kaniska is asking, what types of topics HuggingFace can discover? Can it find if an entity is related to medical terms? Yeah, depending on your training, you know, you can. We have some companies which pre-trained or fine-tuned on medical domain to quite successfully. And then the type of topics, it depends again on your use case. A good way to test that also is to use one of our demo that I have here, which is a zero-shot demo. So it gives you an idea of what it's capable of doing without any training, right? So for example, here, I have some sort of like an article here about like Jupyter, and then you specify some possible topic, and then it's going to do the classification for you, right? So I can do a live example for you. So I'll go to CNN, right? I'll take, you know, maybe I'll take that, right? I'll take this article, right? I'll copy the text here, all right. Then I'll put here, I'll take a custom one. All right, I'll paste it here. And then I can specify a couple of like topics that I want classified, right? So here, maybe I can do entertainment, politics, health, foreign affairs, right? And then I'll run it. And you see here that it classified with health and politics, which kind of like sounds quite right. So you can find this, I'll paste it here. You can find this demo there to try to see how it does in terms of like topics classification in a zero-shot setting, meaning like without any training, really out of the box. All right, so I'll continue. Greg is asking, do you think the NLP models are moving to bigger and inaccessible for an enthusiast in NLP? Because for even fine-tuning, Sir Albert, there is a need for GPU, TPU. Do you think there is more research required for less resource-intensive methods for the same, so that it is easy for anybody to get into NLP? I totally agree. With the fact that we need to do more research on how to make these models more accessible. We're investing really heavily on that. So on our model hub, you'll see all the distilled version and the pruned version of the models that we did ourselves to make them more accessible. I think it's getting more and more accessible actually to NLP practitioners and NLP beginners by the very nature of the technology, which is transfer learning, meaning that you can start using these models and fine-tune these models way more efficiently than you used to do training from scratch before, right? Because you can transfer learn from the pre-training to the fine-tuning, or even ultimately probably to the inference. So we do think that it's actually getting easier and easier for newcomers in the field to get accurate NLP than before. The whole industry has to work on making these models more accurate, more accessible, but they're getting more accessible faster than any other technology before. If you think of any other technology, when it's released as a research paper, for example, it usually takes like, I don't know, at least 3-4 years before you can use in production. Now, it's with transformers, specifically with our library, it's really a matter of days after the research paper is published that companies are starting to use it in production, which is pretty impressive and unprecedented in the grand scheme of technology. Before, you needed to wait really like a few years before being able to take advantage of the science progress. Now, it's just a matter of days, which is really impressive, I think. All right, I get another question from Hamed. For those interested in entrepreneurship in AI, can you provide your input on viable AI business models and how they can compete with very well-financed industry giants? It's a good question. We haven't figured that out at HuggingFace yet. We're not generating any revenue right now. It's not our main focus yet. I believe that you'll be able to create a lot of value in AI. So if you're getting usage, if you're getting interest for what you're building, ultimately you'll be able to build a viable business model. I don't believe in the theory that the bigger players, because they have arguably a bigger data set, that they're the only one who can do cool stuff on the topic. I think you have different strengths as a startup. I think we kind of proved that by building the most popular open source NLP library, whereas like obviously a lot of the technology giants wanted to build that and didn't manage to build that. I think as an entrepreneur and as a startup, you still have strengths on the topic of AI compared to larger companies that are moving slower almost by definition. All right, Steven is asking, can you remove CNN and see how it classifies? All right, I'll remove CNN here and I'll run that again. All right, yeah, it changed a little bit. Not too much, right? Still 82% for health and 26% for politics. And Stephen also asked, and if you remove Texan replaced with Armenian, I'll try to do that. All right, Texas Armenian, right? Is there another Texas Armenian? All right, I'll remove all of them. Armenia. All right, here we go. Let's classify it like that. All right. Yeah, it adds a little bit of foreign affair. So it's pretty interesting. It's probably because the data set is from the US, right? So if you add Armenia, then it considers some sort of like foreign affairs. It's pretty interesting. All right. There's another question from Greg. Do you think Opencl should be adopted by the deep learning frameworks since Cuda is the only choice of the industry by giving NVIDIA the monopoly, even though AMD GPUs might be cheaper? It's a good question. Again, as the CEO of HuggingFace, I don't get to go that deep sometimes on subjects like that. So I'm not sure I would be the best person to answer this question. Feel free to tweet it, mentioning HuggingFace, and I'm sure someone from the team would be able to answer something like that. I put here my Twitter handle and also my email address. So if anyone has any other answer or a question, or if you want to use NLP in your company and that you need help, or yeah, anything, really feel free to reach out to me. I think we covered most of the questions, unless there are more of them. I feel like we got a good overview there. Alexi, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a great overview, and I think the text questions worked really well. So I'll save this chat and post it alongside with the video recording. But we have time for regular Q&A. So if you guys want to ask questions just by saying them, this is the time to do it. So we can try that, guys. You will have to unmute yourself first because everybody is muted by default.
So Clement, this is Vamsi. What inspired you to build this, build a HuggingFace and this particular model of open source?
Yeah, I've been obsessed with NLP for quite a while. As I said, I started with computer vision, and I always figured that NLP would be a much bigger field, just because of the importance of text in everyday life. So yeah, out of an obsession for NLP, we started at the beginning, as I said, with open domain conversational AI. We wanted to build her from like from the movie, and we kind of like yeah, been lucky to build underlying technology that we realized was useful for more companies than just ourselves. So we started to open source it, and people started using it. Then it kind of like makes sense with our vision that you know, not one company will solve NLP. You know, like we really need to take like a collaborative open source approach to this to solve such a different problem and such a different challenge. So open source was the way to go, and the way that we felt like we could more contribute to the ecosystem. And there was at the beginning of the chat, there was a question about why the HuggingFace name and logo. We wanted to have an emoji as a name because when we go public, we want to be the first company to go public with an emoji versus the 3 identifier letters that companies usually have when they go to the stock market. So we absolutely wanted an emoji. And then when we looked at the list of emojis, we felt like the hugging face emoji was the best one to represent NLP because it's still an emoji, right? So it's a machine, it's a technology, it's not human. But at the same time, it's showing a very human emotion, right? The hug. The same way NLP used to be something that is only human, right? Only humans could understand. And now with technology, you manage to understand it. So we felt like it was a good kind of like a metaphor for natural language processing, this hugging face emoji. Unfortunately, right now with coronavirus, we've tried to advocate for less hugging. At some point, we changed our logo, added a mask to the logo to help spread the word of obviously social distancing and everything. But obviously, hopefully in the next few months, in the next few years, when we'll find a cure for coronavirus, we'll be able to hug people again.
Yeah, can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so, hey Clement, this is Stephen. Yeah, thanks for your really good presentation. So if you can probably see my question in chat. And my first question is your zero-shot model, is it naturally US-centric because you wanted it to be, or simply the sort of built-in bias that most news sources are US or currently are concentrating on US events? And,
yeah.
and B, can we tweak that? Do we have weights? So as I say, if I wanted a model that was focused in Central Asia, where Kazakhstan was local and Uzbekistan and Mongolia were regional and everything else was foreign.
Yeah.
Is that something?
So here, yeah. So here, like for the zero-shot demo, so the model is BART MNLI, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you go back to the paper or the blog post and you search Datasets.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my sort of hidden intent is pre-trained models are nice, but especially if you're dealing with low resource languages, if I dealt with, say, African language, it's actually bad to learn the inbuilt bias of the dominant news sources and to be conscious. So the word domestic, if I say I want a domestic beer, not an imported one, that may mean something different, and it's very context.
Yeah, totally. And to answer your second question and your first question at the same time, it's all based on open source, right? So you can obviously fine tune it or pre-train it on a different data set for it to fit better your own context and your own task, and remove some of the biases that you don't want.
But if I take an off-the-shelf, my intent is kind of more like if I take a standard off-the-shelf model, I have to assume that sort of words like domestic and election and president are sort of polluted with regionally specific assumptions.
Totally, yeah. And that's why we, as I said, we push people to give more and more information about biases like that in the model cards. Mm-hmm. So that if you take their models, then you can have a good view of what are the biases and see if it fits or if it's too much of a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like, for example, on this task, so if you want to do classification, right here. So if you want to do text classification, then you have like all these models that you can look at. Yeah. And they all have like different biases, but maybe you can find one that fits your use case. And if you can't, then you can use our training scripts to basically train it on your own data sets.
Yeah, actually, a fast and dirty trick I used to use with word factors is I would just look at the word domestic and then compare it to every country. So like whatever, US, Russia, and then you can see what it aligns with and, you know, the closest distance. And that's good for explainability, but is there an equivalent of that with Transformer? The nearest, nearest cluster?
Yeah, a couple of so in the ecosystem there are a couple of like explainability tools. You know, I showed like at the beginning of the talk, I showed experts. So some people have been working on that. I'm not super deep on the topic, so I'm not sure I would be the right person to point you to the exact right tool.
Sure.
But
I can classify. I can write a for loop. I can classify the same sentence with 200 different country names, and I can see which one domestic classifies closest to.
Yeah,
current events.
And I hope one of our goals by being at the center of the ecosystem is to foster more and more explainability tools to appear. We think we're still at the very beginning of it, and we need to understand better what happens in these models. So if you end up working on a tool that works for you, I would really encourage you to open source it, try to integrate it with transformers, because we see a lot of demand for it, and we believe it's very important to work on these topics.
Sure, absolutely. So last throwaway comment, when I typed Mars attacks, it was classified as 99% foreign. So we're all safe in Kazakhstan.
Nice.
Baikonur is safe.
That's funny. Another way I wanted maybe at some point to show it, to see like biases too, is another demo that we have, which is long form question answering. That is trained on Wikipedia and Reddit with something called Li5. So basically the goal of the task is to explain complex questions in a very simple way. So like, for example, what's the best way to treat a sunburn? And then it's going to take some information from different articles. It's a really fun demo to play with. It shows also a lot of like bias sometimes, both from the model and from the data set. But it's an interesting thing to check too. The goal of most of our demos is to give people more tools to understand how these models work. So that's usually the motivation for our demos. We have another one that is called Write with Transformer, which is autocomplete. So you basically, I'm gonna post it in the chat at the same time. That where you can test the autocomplete with like different like model size, different top P, different temperature, and then it auto-completes like that. But the purpose of most of our demos is to give people tools to look at what these models are producing, to understand them better, and hopefully take better choices when they want at some point to put these models in production.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, go ahead.
I saw that you showed some front end to your models via your website. Is there any chance to access it via REST API or programmatic way? Yeah,
that's something we're going to release soon. That we've been working on pretty hard in the past few weeks. So yeah, you can, if you wanna preview, feel free to send me an email. And I can send you an early access to it, but it's coming pretty soon.
Did you post your email? And did I miss it?
Yeah, it's Clement. So it's my name at huggingface.co.
Got it. Thank you.
I'll post it in the chat too, just in case. Cool. Are there any other questions?
Got a question for Clement?
Yeah.
So you were saying the hardest topic area is general conversation. Do you have any general comments about NLU? Because every time I see NLU and people talking about speaker intent, it's always like, I want to buy somebody a dress for a birthday present, and it's never sort of deeper, let's say multi-purpose NLU, like that you can actually sustain a conversation with an artificial personality on multiple topics. And it's got a sense of humor, it's got a sense of context, like a, quote unquote, real human conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really hard topic. NLU, like it's addition of a lot of like different NLP tasks, right? And you have to be really good at each and every single one of them to give the impression in the context of a conversation to really understand and to reach human level. So yeah, it's really hard. If you want to take a look at what we believe is kind of like state of the art, I think we have a demo for that too. That is pretty cool. I think it's something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
I am
Like,
posting
what
in
would
the
you
chat too.
what would you say is missing? What's the worst missing feature from conversational AIs currently?
It's a tough question. It's a tough question. It's $1 million question for sure.
Well, I mean, I can make a comment. Like when you say context earlier, I noticed you say context is like credit card or whatever. It's sort of very shallow. But if this was like a bank, would we expect to see more context? Like this customer has been with us for 20 years. They have this credit card with this limit. This is their income. This is their family. This is their spending pattern. Is context an arbitrarily deep thing?
I don't know. I mean, I think to answer your question, my guess, but maybe it's not the right guess, and I don't have kind of like a, but I think to me, one of the areas where we're working really hard at HuggingFace and that we think is really promising for NLP in general, but specifically for conversational, is the ability to add more structured data to the representations. I feel like in like a conversation, you can extract a lot of information. You can use a lot of conversation that are more in a structured way, like databases and stuff like that. And that when you'll be able to really use that in addition to more kind of like unsupervised models, I think that's when you'll see really good progress, because that's when the conversation won't only kind of like make sense in a general way, but also be accurate. Like the facts will be accurate, which I think is still like a big thing missing for like a good conversational AI. So I would say, yeah, like ability to create more hybrid, like knowledge representations in a way is something that we're investing a lot on in terms of research that I believe could bring conversational AI maybe to the next level.
Sure, but when I'm thinking more about that credit card example, so like say if it's NLU, like for suggesting financial product, if you suggest like say college savings plan for somebody, if you know they live in the US, if you know that they don't have kids, that's one thing. If you know that they have children age 2, that's another thing. If they have children age 29, it's another thing. So to what extent do you really want to incorporate like a very deep sort of context object in the model itself, as opposed to just doing a sort of, graph query on all of the information we have about the customer? Like maybe the model, if we start overfitting the model to all sorts of users, maybe that's the wrong place to stick the context.
Yeah, maybe. It's a difficult question. I might have given you a better answer at the beginning of this talk. Now after an hour 15, I'm not sure I'll be able to give you a good answer on that.
Yeah, maybe I can give a very small answer. I'm Thomas. I'm working more on the science side at HuggingFace. Because I think these models, these are really interesting, and definitely it's kind of strange, right? That we store all the knowledge in the model, and then the model is this static object that you carry on for years, right? Like Bert will always think that the president of all the countries were the president they were in 2018 when it was trained. So yes, we are actually actively working on that, and we have
ephemerality, Thomas.
Yeah, what?
Ephemerality, ephemeral, time changing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We would like the model to evolve and to be able to ingest new knowledge. And so we have a nice collaboration that we will publish, that we will release in a few weeks, I hope, with research teams who are working on models which include a database in the model with a retrieval component. And so when you ask the question, the model first queries its database and then retrieve the components and then digest it. So it's all neural net, right? It's all like this. It's all deep learning, but there is this evolving component in the models. We are very, very excited about that at HuggingFace. And actually, one of the reasons we released the NLP, the dataset processing library, which is actually a lot more than just dataset processing, but is basically just this huge database processor library that make it very efficient to query a big database and to use that in the model. One of the main reasons we released this library is to allow people to use more this type of models because they are not really used. Well, I mean, I don't think people work enough with this type of evolving models right now. And one of the main reasons is that the tools are missing. So as always, we set it up our task to fix the tool and to let people like use more these models. So yeah, just stay tuned, and I'm happy to get your feedbacks on this release. That when we do it, it should be in July, so pretty soon.
Yeah, I think I broke your Convey-I model. I typed who should be shot, and the answer is the police officer I work for, I have a gun. So the guy wants to shoot his boss, or the guy believes his boss should be shot.
Yeah. Cool. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry if I showed you a little bit of my Gmail. I forgot I wasn't sharing my screen.
Is it allowed to ask? So you guys are currently privately funded. Are you intending to be acquired? Yeah. Are you going
no, we're privately funded. No, we're privately funded. We think we can build like an independent company. That's what we're trying to do. We've been lucky that investors allowed us so far to only focus on open source and open source adoption and science. At some point, we'll have to work on our business plan, have a business model rather, but we're not there yet.
No, sure, it's superb. But I mean, what are the KPI? Like even 5 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been able to do this. What are the KPI people want to see to sort of justify? Is it downloads, usage, API?
You mean the investors?
Yeah, everybody, investors, anybody who wants to try to understand the valuation.
Yeah, I mean, I think usage. We have really massive usage on our open source now. So it's a good proxy to see that we're doing something useful for the community, just because, a lot of researchers, a lot of companies are using our open source. That's a good proxy for you to see that you're working on something good. That's one of the beauty also of releasing research and releasing open source. Which is that you can see if it really makes sense or not. Like if we were like a research lab just working in a closed source, not releasing things, we could say we built the best thing, but nobody could really say if it's true or not, versus kind of like working in like a open setup and open source. We can see if people are using our tools. If they're using our tools, it means that it's probably useful. If they don't, it's probably not as useful as we thought, and we have to work harder.
Sure. No, sure. I mean, I'm saying that nobody's pressuring you to become like a SaaS service. So you're just a pure play open source AI company, and you're not going to become a SaaS and start doing hosted or anything.
We don't know, to be honest. Like right now, we're still focusing on open source. It's always going to be the core thing for us. We have many ideas for like more like paid features that we might start experimenting with at some point. But we really don't know at the moment.
Thanks for the presentation. It's awesome.
Thanks everyone. All right, thanks guys. Okay. Let's thank Clement once again. Thank you, Clement. It was awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll post the video soon on functional.tv, so you guys can share it with everybody else. And I also will save the chat with the excellent questions and post them there. Thank you, guys.
Sounds good. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.